Hello, my name is Mederic, and this is a message from Med. Last week, Med and I discussed the 22nd chapter of 1 Samuel. While David was on the run, many people with many problems joined him, and Saul had Ahimelech executed for helping David. What will David do with his new followers? What will Saul do to try to capture David? The Philistines attacked the city of Keilah, so David inquired of God to see if he should go to help fight the Philistines, and God said yes. However, David's men were afraid and said, "Behold, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more than if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines?" David sought God's counsel, and God responded, "Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will give the Philistines into your hand." So David went and was victorious against the Philistines. Saul found out that David was in Keilah and thought, "God has given him into my hand, for he has shut himself in by entering a town that has gates and bars." Saul gathered his army to besiege the town, but David found out about Saul's plan and asked Abiathar, the priest, to seek God's counsel. First, he asked if Saul would put the city under siege, and the Lord said yes. He then asked if the people of Keilah would turn him in, and God again said yes. The ephod of the priest contained the Urim and Thummim, which were used to find out God's will. One would ask a yes or no question, and then cast some stones that were marked. The idea was that God would have the stones land to respond to the question according to his will. David went out from Keilah, so Saul did not besiege it. David and his men wandered from place to place until they arrived at the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph, where he stayed at strongholds there. Saul sought him every day, but he was unable to find him. One day Jonathan, Saul's son, went to Horesh to meet with David and told him, "Do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father also knows this." The two again made a covenant before the Lord, and Jonathan went home. The Ziphites went to Gibeah to tell Saul that David was in hiding among them, and that they would surrender David to him. Saul replied, "May you be blessed by the Lord, for you have had compassion on me. Go, make yet more sure. Know and see the place where his foot is, and who has seen him there, for it is told me that he is very cunning. See therefore and take note of all the lurking places where he hides, and come back to me with sure information. Then I will go with you, and if he is in the land, I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah." When David discovered that the Ziphites wanted to surrender him to Saul, he wrote Psalm 54, where he continued to cry out to God, "O God, save me by your name, and vindicate me by your might. O God, hear my prayer. Give ear to the words of my mouth. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life." When the Ziphites returned from Gibeah, David was in the wilderness of Maon to the south, so Saul went after him, but they were separated by a mountain. Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. And David was hurrying to get away from Saul. Fortunately, as Saul was closing in on David and his men, he received an urgent message. "Hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid against the land." Saul returned from pursuing David to fight the Philistines, and then that place was called the Rock of Escape. Then David went to live in the strongholds of En-gedi. David was anointed as king and was faithful to his calling even before he was recognized as the king of Israel. As we have said previously, David is a representation of Jesus. In his first sermon in the Gospel according to Luke, Jesus read the following passage. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, and set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." David had the same calling to help the needy just as Jesus, the son of David. He received the needy even when he was running for his life, and he also felt compelled to go and save the city of Keilah despite being under attack himself. However, David consulted with God before taking action. When he received the news about Keilah's plight, David inquired the Lord before going to defend them. Afterward, when Saul sought to besiege Keilah, he inquired of the Lord before leaving. One can imagine that this is because he did not want to face the same ordeal he faced when he was captured by the Philistines in Gath. Perhaps he could have thought that God had abandoned him, especially after the Ziphites revealed to Saul that he was among them. But instead he said, "God has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies." It is possible that David wrote these words while Saul was still pursuing him. So this shows that David was expecting a victory from God even before obtaining it. Jonathan did not hesitate to visit David because he knew that David needed encouragement after having been on the run for so long. "Do not fear, you shall be king over Israel. Saul, my father, knows this." Solomon said, "Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel." It is possible that David would tell Solomon of the times that Jonathan encouraged David when he was on the run because of Saul's envy. If we truly want to serve God faithfully like David, we must be faithful to our calling and live out our purpose here on earth. When our neighbor is in need, we must seek to help them just as Jonathan did and not put them down like Saul. Thank you. God bless.